Welcome, everybody. My name is Angel Acosta, and just really grateful to have this opportunity to be in dialogue with Brother Bayo Akomolafe. Brother Bayo is someone who I appreciate enormously. Doesn't capture the feeling. And before I invite Brother Bayo into a conversation, I want to tell you a little bit about the Garrison Institute Fellowship Program. The fellowship program started in 2020 in the middle of the global pandemic. And we um, started off as a kind of a beta project, inviting 11 fellows, all coming from a variety of fields and disciplines from neuroscience, anthropology, psychology, sound healing, psychotherapy, architects, um, and across a 2-year period, just really creating a space for them to think about their work in relation to the mission of the Institute and fundamentally creating a sanctuary for the next generation of contemplative leaders. It was a tall order in terms of the fundamental pillars, which were collective healing, the science of interconnection, generative action, and awareness-based contemplative wisdom. That last pillar really is an extension of the Institute's legacy in light of the fact that the Institute for the last 20 years has tried to harness the power of ancient wisdom traditions and marry that, integrate that with scientific inquiry. So that's the formal pitch, the formal overview. Let's get to some post-activism, which from my understanding is almost like a simulation of how to become a trickster. And Bayo, for me, represents a trickster in chief, a trickster in residence. And so allow me to just speak a little bit about Bayo and Bayo's work, and then invite him into some dialogue with us. I want to thank you, Bayo, for how generous you are with your mind, with your heart, with your lineage. Um, I haven't come across as many scholars and thinkers who are of your caliber, who also make time in their calendar to connect with people who are curious. So I just want to really genuinely thank you for the ways in which you've opened your calendar, your mind, your heart, your family to the Institute, to the Garrison, and to me. It's meant the world to me to be exposed to your work about 3 to 4 years ago and be really jarred and rocked and challenged by it. And then also be able to directly talk to you about some of those ideas. I also want to say that this conversation is an extension of a previous conversation that Bayo and I had. The theme, the title, the exact title was Wrestling with Post-Activism. And we both agreed that the word wrestling was appropriate in light of you and I pushing back on each other and playing with each other and leveraging this metaphor of wrestling, because these are hard ideas to cope with. So with that being said, I in a moment, I want to invite Bayo in, check in with him, see how he's doing. And then we'll launch into a 30, 40-minute dialogue and then open the floor up to the community, So Brother Bayo, how are you? I think you're in Germany right now. I think you might be, but tell us, where are you? How are you feeling? I love that top. I think we're both vibing right now. I got the swirl.
Yep, this is very Yoruba. This is very ordinary, actually.
Mm.
And we're back in India from
Mm.
Germany. So
Mm.
re-entry was a bit turbulent, but we're fine and we're settling in and we're back home together. So yes, brother. And it's good to see everyone. Hello from India. I'm waving. So you ought to wave back. That's the contract.
So just to give just a little uh, more context to the conversation, you coined the term post-activism, and so if in the future any of us get in trouble for it, you may be liable. um, and I've been really fascinated by how much it's grown as a concept in terms of the people you've invited to be in dialogue with you. Um, I've been following those dialogues. The one in recently, the one at the Center for Othering and Belonging with John Powell, and also with Kiaga Taylor. So I wanted to support you in this journey of you walking through just treating this concept of post activism. And could you share, for those of us in the room who are somewhat new, could you share what the gist of the concept is, and then we'll jump into where I'm still struggling with it.
Okay. Let me start with a question. This is a very Nigerian thing to do, Angel. Is that when Nigerians are met with questions, we present questions in response to the questions. So I am Nigerian after all. So, and the question is one I'd like everyone to sit with and just sit with it. What if the way we respond to crisis is part of the crisis? Just think about that for a moment. What if everything we can do or everything we do to respond to a catastrophic situation or circumstance is that situation becoming more intelligent, is becoming more resourced by everything we do to stop it from happening, right? I encountered this saying, Resma. I was in conversation with Resma this morning, 5 a.m. my time, and he said something that someone had said to him. He said that the job of the caterpillar is to resist the butterfly. Right? The job of the caterpillar is to resist the butterfly. That in the act of eating and resisting, almost like eating is a postponement of the butterfly, but even that resistance is caught up in the intelligence of something more, something different, something else wanting to happen, right? And then the caterpillar inadvertently, if we take this to be true, inadvertently creates the conditions for its demise. It becomes an imaginal goop, cells in soup, and then those cells become the butterfly. So I'm reading through history and looking at conditions of acting. I'm informed by what you might call the material turn. Brother, you're familiar with this idea, of course. The material turn is the contemporary desire to read humans and human action through their environment and not to keep divorcing them, humans and actions and human agency, from their ecological contexts. That is, another way of saying that quite simply is that we act like our environments. The modern neoliberal tradition that sees will and choice and agency as domiciled in Anne or Juliet or Val or Hillary here, right? That it's inside you and you are independent and sovereign and unindebted. I don't think that's a word. Unentangled, right? from the world around you, right? That's a very modern way of seeing things. It sees the world as composed of dots. It's becoming increasingly difficult to see the world in those ways now, brother. We're now seeing ourselves as lines. We're now seeing how microbial bacteria influence our decisions. We're now noticing how textures and architecture, creates affective spaces, right? That composes behavior and makes us behave in ways that might seem trite and trifling, but is actually quite significant in how we show up in the world. A simple way to notice this is that we are the world acting upon itself. This is not some new age woo-woo spirituality stuff. This is grounded, and I don't mean to dismiss or pathologize that. I'm just trying to say that this is indigenous. This has prestige. This noticing that we are part of the world acting upon itself is prestigious. It has legacies in indigenous research and insights in material eco-criticism and feminist new materialisms, right? So taking that premise that we don't act upon the world independently, switching off the lights, parsing your trash independently and putting them in neatly arranged boxes so that you can send elsewhere and save the planet. These actions are not independent actors acting upon the world. Instead, they're territories that are creative and reinforcing themselves, right? I'm just going to take a quick detour using that example to make my point. I've often used the example of exactly what I just spoke about, of people in the industrialized West and in the world, taking pains to put plastic. I don't know how it works, Angel. You have to help me out here. Plastic in green, I don't know, blue, red, food in one. And this doesn't apply where I come from. Certainly not here in India, and definitely not in Nigeria. Why? Why do we chuckle when we see these practices? It's because at some level, we know that it comes to us, right? 90-something% of those discarded materials don't go to a green, faraway land where it's recycled, right? It comes to Africa. It goes to Vietnam. It goes to the Gambia. It goes to India, right? I grew up in spaces largely textured and defined by the rubbish sent in from the Western industrialized world, right? But even saying this, we're still, even when I mention this to some people, they're unable to extricate themselves from that feeling, from that desire, that compelling imperative to act in the ways they know how to act, right? Right, to keep on doing that. My dear sister, Vanessa Andriotti, calls it a dopaminergic network. Dopamine is the chemical in the brain that secretes this pleasure principle, right? It secretes this desire to be righteous, if you will. So we don't act independently. We act together with, we become with, we think with. Cognition is not here. Cognition is a network. It's ecological. Language is not here. Language is territorial. Even feeling is not here. Feeling is atmospheric. We don't feel things. Feeling enlists us in how it comes to matter. That changes the entire story altogether of action and agency, right? Because it no longer becomes about the activist getting yourself together to act upon the world. It means that territories are the ones that act, not agents, not individuals, right? And it also means and suggests that sometimes we can get stuck in ways of acting that repeats the crisis, even when we're doing our darndest to get away from it. So post-activism is not a doctrinaire insistence on a surer way to emancipation. It's not a way of saying, here's the right path to go, follow it. It's more an invitation to sense the irony of action. It's an explosive disruption that rekindles and reformulates action in ways that are post-human, that invites us to stay with the trouble of noticing that sometimes when we act, we might be reinforcing the very conditions we're acting against, like the caterpillar that thinks it's getting rid of the butterfly by eating more. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is post-activism. I have many names for it. The one that really caught on was post-activism. In my hidden privacy, I have para-activism, schiz-activism. No one cares about those ones. The one that everyone seems to be buying into is post-activism, but it is not an after activism. It's not a dismissal of protest. It's not a saying you're doing rubbish. It's a way of noticing that even action is territorial. And we need to think deeply about that in order to find new ways of acting with the world, or else we will remain stuck.
Mm. 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 Yeah. Yeah, you know, I've heard you talk about this for the last year since you've become more public about it, and I just feel how cogent that response is. So just thank you for that, and giving the audience an opportunity to really land with that first offering. So just inviting everybody just to really settle into your bodies and take some deep breaths as we engage in this kind of post-activist discussion where we're all sharing this moment. I want to slow down a little bit, brother, just to acknowledge something that you said around the caterpillar resisting or the resisting the butterfly. I want to make a connection between the synchronicity of that and the history of the Garrison Institute. I say this because this year marks the 20th anniversary of the Institute. And, you know, when institutions, especially nonprofits, are celebrating 10, 20, 30, it's a big deal, you know? Mm-hmm. So the board and many of the strategic allies across those 2 decades have come together to think about how do we celebrate this legacy. And the theme of this year's 20th anniversary celebration is metamorphosis. Metamorphosis. So I just kind of wanted to just kind of make that connection between you opening the dialogue with the caterpillar and the Institute's attempt to make sense of its legacy, but in particular, like where we are right now as a society, where there are just so much is happening. I know Sister Mina might say that there are poly crises, right? Multiple crises. I would agree, and I would say that there are just parallel shifting of paradigms. And in talking about post-activism, it's a glaring and really clear invitation to move away from the grip of how, especially Western industrial society, has divided the mind and the body, you know, has engaged in that classic Cartesian dualism of I think, therefore I am, and centering intellectual reason. So I'm wondering how post-activism is a different kind of intelligence, a different kind of sense-making that is more animist in nature and enlists more bodies in the decision-making process of engaging in action. So just want to just respond there to what you just shared, and if anything is coming up for you there.
I've been speaking about territories, principalities, fields, intensities. These are impersonal ways of speaking. It feels distressing. You know, it might feel distressing to some of us to hear this because we want to reduce it to the level of the individual and saying, but what does it mean for me? And how do I act? How do I make this part of my to-do list every day? How do I make space for this in myself and all of that? But all of this is being called into question. right? There's something non-legible, resolutely, possibly even violently non-communicative and non-intelligible about post-activism. This is the reason why I read it together with the concept of fugitivity, right? A strain away. I'll get to that. We act within territories. One of the most central and compelling readings of Black scholarship has been to notice the territoriality of the human, right? Like the human isn't this isn't this is an outline, so to speak. It's a tracing, right? This is habitual ways of thinking about the human would collapse at the outline that you see on your screens. But the human is more than just the anthropomorphic forms that present, before our eyes, or that we hear or listen to, or that we touch. The human is a migrant murmuration of bodies and enlistments, right? It's a pattern. It's an algorithm. The Anthropocene notices that the human is sedimented in geological strata, right? It's the human is not just a thing on top, on the surface. The human is layers and layers of sedimentation, right? So the human is this colonial territory that involves and features heterogeneous concepts and bodies and matters and things like time zones, trains, a concept of time that is linear, the idea of the individual. All these make up the human. This is why Marisol de la Cadena, a dear friend and professor, would say to me that, hey, Bayo, I think the slave ship wasn't the initial vessel of oppression. It wasn't the initial vessel of capture. It was the human that was the vessel of capture. Black bodies were imported into the human as prosthetic enablers for the idea of the ideal human object, right? Black bodies as prosthetics, right? We will need your back to ascend to heights of supremacy. So the human is a terraforming object, is a terraforming tool, is a story. It's more than a story and a narrative. It's a figure. It's an embodied terraforming object that is creating the world and flattening it to create space for its fetish. And the fetish is the human individual. All our actions seem to be within this space, right? And this space is creative in many ways. It's creative, but it's also incredibly limited. The rationality and logic of this space, what my dear sister, Professor Erin Manning, will call the clearing in the wilds. That's the human. The human is the clearing in the wilds. How we act there has tended only to reinforce that truth, that clearing, right? It's my example with the trash and how we are thinking about recycling. It's the language about around sustainability. What's being sustained here, right? Is the language around sustainability, is our rejection of demise and loss and passing away. We don't know how to hold space for that. Even my field as a recovering clinical psychologist, right? Another dear colleague, Professor Wendy Holloway, would say that psychology is the policeman of capitalism. I like that because it seems that everything we're doing is reinforcing this territoriality, right? So, and at some level, we're sensing that there isn't a lot of room to do much more. I don't know if most of us here are articulating it that way, but the people I meet with sense that there isn't really a lot of room. We've kind of outlived the rituals. Modernity the rituals that ritualize modernity and reify modernity. We've kind of outlived it, and there isn't much room to do much more. What innovation looks like today is Apple Vision Pro. It's basically go deeper into yourself. Here is more convenient apps, right? This is what innovation is. So the ways, and I wrote this recently, I shared this on social media, the way we think about space for acting collapses into one of two aspects of a binary. Either change the world or change yourself. Both of them are saying the same thing. We treat the world as if it were an outside thing that we can change. And changing yourself means retreating into this gilded interiority. Go deeper into yourself, right? If you can align yourself, get all your values in tow, if you can get your to-do lists correctly color-coded, then everything in alignment means the world is in alignment as well. There's a sense in which mastery is implied here, or transcendence is implied. But I think those spaces are increasingly impoverished and hollowing out. So we need a different kind of space to act. And that to me is the space of the crack. Notice that a crack is neither inside nor outside, right? Think about a dent, or think about it this way. Think about your footprint in mud, right? That your footprints, the lines that is created, the imprintation, the imprint, right? It doesn't belong to your foot, neither does it belong to the mud alone, singularly. It belongs to the interstitial space where your foot impacts the mud, right? It's not subjective nor objective, it is transjective, right? I made up that word a while ago, and I was so happy with myself. I was so pleased with myself. And then I rushed online and I found someone had gotten there before me, and I was really mad. I was like, you know, but transjective is my point, that the crack is a betweening of spaces. It's when when some kind of explosive intelligence bursts through, and it's a space of especially this disability. A crack is disabling. A crack is a crack for that reason. It's a critique of wholeness. It's a critique of arrival, right? Of continuity, right? I feel that, and maybe I should take a step back or several steps back. I hope people are following. Sometimes I don't follow myself, and I find it difficult to, I'm meandering. I constantly meander. I don't know how to get to the point, my wife often says. But here's the deal, that disability is post-humanist, right? Disability is animist, because disability is a calling into question our claims to exclusivity. It's a calling into question our claims to being fully embodied. My son is autistic, as I am. Maybe that's one of my reasons I don't know how to get to the point. I'm mildly so. He's more severe than I am. He thinks of time in ways that are very, very strange to me, right? I don't know if I share this with you, brother, but every time he wakes up in the morning, he says, "Merry Christmas" to me.
No.
Have I told you this? Did I share this with you in Sintra in Portugal? He says it to me unironically. He's not joking. He means business. He wakes up with joy every morning. It's like, it's Christmas. He's 5 years old, and he believes with all his might that it's Christmas. He dresses us up in Christmas costumes. I have my Santa Claus costume ready to go anytime he wants that to happen, right? One day I got fed up with this, and I kind of said to him, you know that it isn't Christmas, right? It's not really Christmas. Christmas is December 25th. And this thing descended on him. His face changed, and he grew really sad, and I grew really ashamed. And he was like, but it is Christmas. It is Christmas, Dada. I shared this story with my brother, Orland Bishop, and I remember him chiding me. right? He says, why are you trying to gentrify him into your own sense of time? He's dealing with time in a way that is not linear or neurotypical. Time isn't straightforward with him because time is always yet to begin for him. Why don't you form agreements with him? Ritualize this process with him instead of trying to drag him into your own violently normopathic ways. That's what post-activism is. It's a politics that is built around refusing to fix the errant subject. It's a politics that is built around disability. Disability not as a less than, but disability as an excess. Because the cosmos works with disability. It works with loss. It works with failure. The only way for it to produce exquisite fields of novelty is for it to produce disability, cracks, openings, where explosion happens. Our human-inspired territorial left or right politics does not know what to do with this. What it wants to do is to fix things up, is to get back to normal, whether you're on the left or on the right, is to sustain, is to continue. But the world is telling us in more ways than one that she will not be put in the family way. The world is saying, this is where you stop. And I want you to practice stopping. Stopping is not doing anything. Stopping is doing a lot. Stopping is holding each other as we fall apart together. That's the aesthetic of post-activism. Is an aesthetic of exile.
Yeah. Just want to give the community here a little bit of space to take all of that in and resonate with that wisdom and meandering, slight tangent. There's all kind of conceptualization of loitering.
Yeah. I get you. I hear you, brother.
You're loitering. You're loitering.
I know this. Stay with it. Stay with it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the community got a chance to integrate that. And then also I got a chance to sit in the course you taught at the Science of Non-Duality, I think last fall. And you had that was when you first laid out your transversal and transjective theory of trauma.
Here we go.
I'm just laughing because it did a number on me. And it was in conversation with post-activism and also with fugitivity. So I just wanted to give the community just a breadcrumb of where they might want to find out more around that work. Just a couple of things, just to dive into fugitivity a little bit, and also the role of the trickster in terms of serving kind of like as a role model for how to possibly move as a post-activist, you could say. But before I ask the question around fugitivity, there's something about what you said around the world forcing us to stop. When I heard you in Portugal at Sintra, there were so many different scientists and people from the business community. And I remember a very sharp exchange between you and a business leader. And in response to this moment of incredible crisis, and the business leader, the scholar, was saying, oh yeah, we need to fall forward. We need to fall forward. But
Fail forward.
Fail forward.
Yeah.
And you quickly said, no, we need to fail awkwardly. We just fall awkwardly. And I just wanted to lift that, but also say that there's something about what you're inviting us to do is to a surrender of sorts, a letting go of sorts. And I just want to say how hard it is, And then also begin to invite you to talk a little bit more about fugitivity and what's the role of fugitivity in terms of post-activism And what becomes possible when we engage in fugitive and post-activist work?
Mm, mm. Let's stay with that question. In Hamburg, I showed images of I don't know how to pronounce his name well. He's French, and he's long dead. I think he lived in the late 19th century. I forget his name right now, sorry. But he was a French artist commissioned to imagine the future, brother. Like, if I were to ask you to imagine the year 3000, go, say something. What does the year 3000 look like?
A post-activist future, hopefully, but more loitering.
But what iteration of Apple is existing? Is it iPads or something? Well, this dude had the task of doing that. Like, imagine the year 2000 for France, for Europe. And he did this in 1899. So he had very wild ideas. In one of the paintings, he had a mailman delivering mail in a flying vessel of some kind. Flying car. You might say, that's impressive. Well, it's not impressive because that doesn't happen today, but you could say drones, right? But the vessel looked like a bat, is what I'm trying to say. It looked like a boat with bat wings attached to it, right? He painted the house of a wealthy person with a maid and some artificial intelligence supporting this maid in taking care of the house, right? Except this artificial intelligence looked nothing like ChatGPT or Bing or Google or Siri. It looked like, what's that Disney? Disney, is it Fantasia? No, it's the one where brooms sprout limbs and start to clean the house. Does anyone know that one? It's magical. It's Mickey Mouse. And he does this spell, and all the brooms in the house get bewitched, and they start to clean on their own, right? wooden entrapments or wooden assemblages. They start to do stuff. It looked like that. Fantasia, thank you. Yes, everyone. Thank you. I tried. My point here is all his imaginations of the year 2000 look nothing like 2000. But even more critically, they looked like 1899, right? They looked like the world he was in and the logic of that world that he was in. He could not have imagined Twitter. He could not have imagined USB-C. He could not have imagined smart screens. He imagined the world with the resources that he had. One might even venture to say that 1899 was doing the imagination, right? Again, we don't imagine alone, right? We imagine along with, right? Imagination is a public affair. Even our private lives are public events. So there is a very potent sense in which if we know exactly where we're going, we might be risking going to where we've already been. Right. I get suspicious when we have a full plan, when we know exactly what to do, when we know exactly where we're going. Here's the manifesto, here's the blueprint, this is where we're going. There is need for that within local constraints, yes. But I'm trying to think about the ways that becomes a shifting around of the symptoms to appear like novelty, right? We tell ourselves, oh, we're doing something different, but we're doing the same thing. But one critical example that I love, and I'm sounding like a broken record at this point, repeating this example, is Denmark. A couple of years ago, $170,000 dumped into, well, not dumped, invested wisely, you might say, into clearing their beaches in one of the municipalities of debris and plastic, right? They get the tractors in, the tractors clear them out. And then the tractors turn towards the ocean and dump it back into the ocean, right? You might say that's stupid. And stupidity means impervious to new matter, right? But there's a sense in which we're in the business of doing that. We're in the business of being impervious to what the world is doing. And so we're just going around in circles like an ant death trap. We're just going round in circles. The only reason why we are able to afford ourselves the luxury of believing that we're doing something different is because we don't come around to ourselves as quickly as the Danes did, right? We don't come around that quickly. There's some time that goes. So my point here is that we often repeat ourselves when we believe that we're doing something different. We often reinforce toxic cycles of repeatability. This is what I call a slushy standpoint. This is what I call stuckness. It's the pheromonic equivalent, or it's the human equivalent, the entomological phenomenon of a pheromonic trail. You know, it's called a death trap. You've heard of this? Where ants go around in circles, believing that they're home or about to get home. And they keep going around in those circles until they die out of exhaustion, right? We have that sociology going on for us. So that what we need is rupture. What we need is extrication from sensorial monocultures. What we need is a break. What we need is a fissure. And we don't know how to produce that. It's not left to us. This is humbling, right? It's not left to us to produce cracks because we are not the center of the universe. And we've known this for long, but we just don't know how to process that, right? Cracks are crossings. They're exquisite transversal crossings that leave traces of the impossible, traces of the unspeakable, right? They cut across politics, they cut across moral architectures, they cut across personological trajectories, they cut across salvific empires, they cut across our rail tracks, our railways. They are like crossroads. They cut us dead in the middle, right? But they're alive places, right? So this is where the trickster comes in, because our culture, my culture, the Yoruba people teach about and talk about the trickster as sitting at the crossroads, right? Where things get dense and interesting is when we don't know what the future looks like, when it's non-legible, when it's unspeakable. That's when the work begins, right? So what kind of a politics can allow us to stay with that trouble, to adorn the cracks of our not knowing together, right? To stay with it together, to process the cracks, right? To put our handprints on the walls of the dark caves in which we've made our temporary home, Well, how do we do that is the question. How do we frame a politics from fugitivity? Let me take a different tangent, brother. Could I just
Yeah, please
do something else as
please.
I weave this with great humility? We've spoken about healing, right? We've spoken about healing, and I want to say that healing, there are many semantic federations that attach to what healing might mean. Your work being here, and I'm not just talking about you, brother, everyone here might have understandings of what healing is, right? That healing is this, healing is that. I'm using an idea of healing as restoration to a familiar pattern, right? A familiar pattern. There is a sense in which that is also a troubling reinstatement and reinforcement of the familiar. of bodies as units of surveillance in capitalist arrangements. And I'm not going to go deep into Philip Dick's Electric Dreams or sci-fi anthologies to make this point, except to say this. Maybe I'll use Greek mythology. Prometheus is punished by being tied because he gives fire to mankind. So he's punished by being tied to the mountainside. And every morning, a giant eagle or bird of some kind comes down and pecks and eats up his liver. Right? You know the story, do you? The eagle eats up his liver, and because it's a divine liver, it grows out by night. It's hued by night. And then the cycle repeats itself in the morning. Eats it up again, by night it closes up. Eats it up again, closes up. Eats it up again, closes up. If you and I were to climb that mountain, I don't know the name now, if we were to climb that mountain at night and we witnessed Prometheus healing up and we congratulated him and say, hey, brother, you're healing, you're doing good, he would punch us if he had his hands free to do that, or spit in our faces. Why? Because at this point in time, more than 1,000 years in line, he would be unable to distinguish between trauma and closure. He would be unable to distinguish between the wound and healing, because what they would be doing is sustaining his incarceration by that mountainside. Demise, death would be liberation for him. So I'm asking questions here, and I'm asking you to feel along with me. That molecular part of yourself that is longing for a different kind of politics. I'm just asking you. I'm not speaking truth here. I don't dabble in truth. Truth is for citizens. I'm fugitive. Right. I'm asking you to feel molecularly alongside me. Are there ways in which restoration could be restoration to a troubling baseline reality? Right. Are there ways in which, when we talk about healing or getting whole, we are using the premise of a dissociated body? Right. Is there a way in which we have performed justice as a climbing from the middle of the slave ship to the upper deck, right? Where justice is saving the minority and pulling the minority from their marginalized status to having a seat at the table, right? On the upper deck. The thing is, even if you put me on the upper deck of the slave ship, I am still part of the furniture of the slave ship, and that is problematic, right? So we're not just talking about trauma and healing. We're not just talking about the limitations, not the pathology, but the limitations of inclusion and inclusivity. We're not just talking about the limitations of healing. You know, we are in different territory now altogether, brother. We're in a space where we're at the edge of the land, and we're witnessing the ocean, and we're being called now that in this time when there's no more room to be healed, when healing seems problematic in a capitalist way, like how can you be well in such unwell times? Like how can you have everything aligned? If you have everything aligned, then I have suspicions. How can you have yourself together in such out of whack times, right? So it seems this is not the time where the archetype of the healer or the archetype, and I'm not creating binaries or dichotomies here, but it seems to me that this is not the time where the preeminent status of the archetype belongs to the healer or the leader or the hero. It seems to be that of the trickster, of the fugitive, the one who sneaks away, not to a stable outside, but who queers the liminalities, who dwells with thresholds and invites a shape-shifting enterprise to take space or place. So what we're talking about here, post-activism, transjective notions of trauma, is to notice that sometimes healing gets in the way of our becoming well. Sometimes justice may get in the way of transformation. And the thing to do when that happens, when our rituals that ritualize reality are becoming impoverished is to wait at the crack.
Mm.
And that's where the trickster is.
Yeah. Want to give the community, the audience, an opportunity to sit, continue to sit with that, just to metabolize what is coming through Bayo. He would agree that it's not just him, is a whole lineage of thinkers and beings that are giving us this insight. I'm tempted to continue the dialogue and be selfish and just keep you here with me, but I want to invite some of the community to wrestle with you.
Yeah,
I feel like we have each other in a chokehold, and I'm almost tapping out. But one last question, in light of me having wrestled with so much of, some people might say you're thinking, but I would maybe say cosmology. Really, it's not just thinking, it's not just philosophizing. There's something else about combining so many traditions. So I'm making the connection between when you were talking about scarification. You were talking about scarification in the African context. And I found that fascinating and provocative, the way that you were talking about how some communities, it's this maiming of oneself and creating scars as one, rites of passage, two, as an arrival of sorts at a certain stage and hierarchy, maybe in a community. But more importantly, three, as a symbolic gesture of breaking away from normal, ordinary ways of thinking about beauty and presence in a given community. And I'm just interested, it just hit me with talking about the trickster, talking about fugitivity and post-activism. In what ways do we need to perform kind of a new way of scarification? In terms of like becoming tricksters, breaking away. So I'm just kind of thinking with you here, I don't have a clear direction of where even that quest, but I just wanted to make a connection between what can we afford, what's possible when we think about scarification in relation to becoming a fugitive and a trickster in our modern context.
So it doesn't even feel like something we perform. Like it doesn't start at the individual to perform scarification. I often refer to that practice.
Please explain scarification to the community.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'm going to do that. So if you were to travel back in time, not too far back, maybe a couple of decades, and you came to my country, Nigeria, especially the south of Nigeria, southwest, you might see people, you might have met my grandmother with lines scratched and burned into her face, crisscrossing patterns, dots, lines, squiggly lines, and all of that. It was a mark of beauty. My grandmother had it. My mother has just a little of it on her cheeks. But as we became modern, our sense of beauty and taste changed. And so it became more categorical, more purer, if you will. And so you would hardly find anyone like that in the city, in Lagos or in Abuja, right? The point here being that over time, we've tended to see that practice of actually etching these marks in the face as a way of naming and christening and marking and territorializing the body we've seen it as primitive, right? It's so far back. It's not with the times, you see. So it's primitive. So my point in trying to resuscitate scarification is to notice that even the modern subject that is apparently devoid of those marks is just as marked as my grandmother, right? I've often used this example of passing through the airport, and I may not be able to recall the physics of it or the chemistry of it, but brother, you just traveled. You just went to Portugal, and now you're in New York, right? You went through either JFK, I don't know which one you went through, but it deposited something active, possibly radioactive, in your body. It marked your body. Our lenses don't allow us to notice those marks, but sometimes they congeal and congregate and they become noticeable, right? But just because we don't notice them doesn't mean they're not there, right? Think about how social media scarifies us, our bodies, our minds, how we're marked, and how this marking is how we ground ourselves, how we are named and called and appellated. I saw a video of a sea creature, I think it was a tortoise or a dolphin, I can't remember which, but it had the mark of Pepsi, the Pepsi logo imprinted on its skin, right? Partially, right? But this was just something free swimming and people are fishing and they just see this creature and it pops up and it has Pepsi logo on its back. Think about that, that we are all, not just humans, we are all being marked, right? In ways that are often difficult to congregate around with words and language. Even the concept of truth. And I see someone saying, hey, I don't get this idea of, let's go back to my son. Was my son telling the truth when he said every day was Christmas? Brother, what do you think? Is he telling the truth or is he telling a lie? Or is that model, is that economy too impoverished to hold what is happening there? If we think of truth as representationalist, like we're corresponding with an objective static reality, and truth is the correspondence between our words and our minds and this stable reality that some scientists have access to when they use the scientific method, then this is coloniality. That's an epistemology that collapses at colonial feet, right? Good question. What is truth? So when Edouard Glissant, Afro-Martinican philosopher, says, I reserve the right to opacity, when Fred Moulton speaks about fugitivity, when Erin Manning speaks about the power of the false, when Black Americans, speak about Bacchanal aesthetics or the Igbo landing, and when they insist that the slaves flew back to Africa, are they telling lies? Or is there something else at work here? And I've taken a detour. This is a larger conversation, philosophical exploration of representationalism and performativism. And it would take some time to break that down. But the things I'm speaking about, when I say I don't dabble in truth, I'm not rejecting accountability. I'm rejecting modes of showing up. I'm rejecting modes of communicability. I'm rejecting modes of intelligibility, right? I'm also taking to myself that right to opacity, right? What Saidiya Hartman calls hypervisibility, or when she says that fact is just a preferred fiction of the nation state. She's playing with that idea that there are other occult modes of being with and in the world that disturbs our ideas of correspondence. But back to scarification. right? We are not performing it. We are marked every day. We're not independent. We are marked. We're not isolated subjects. We are marked. We are not free people. We are indebted, right? And the sooner we come to a realization, and I know it's not entirely intellectual, right? So I don't mean to say that once we realize it, everything will change. No, but coming to terms with the idea, with the embodied idea that we are not alone, that we act with, and we are often enlisted in acting, even when we're not drivers of that action. Coming to terms with that is where the work, I think, really begins. And I cannot tell you what the work looks like in your locality, but I sense that it's an aesthetic assemblage. It's a way of reconvening around disability that is not about fixing it, but it's about staying with it and allowing ourselves to be changed by that intensity. Shall I just end this section of our conversation with an instance? An instance that seems grounded and everyday and ordinary, because post-activism is ordinary. It is the extraordinary longing to be ordinary. My son is autistic, as I've said, and I struggled with that. And I like to tell people that because I often am wary of guruization. Brother, you know this, right? Like, I'm not speaking from a space of superiority or mastery. I'm feeling, we're both feeling together. We're testing out. And basically what I'm doing here is like, are you sensing this too? This thing that just passed, are you noticing too? Are you hearing that? Right? It may not land with you as it is landing with me, but that's okay, right? So I don't want to be placed on a pedestal. I'm researching. I'm a researcher. I'm asking questions. I wash dishes. I change diapers. I wash the clothes. I have highs and lows. I speak very well sometimes, and I fall flat also. But when I get home, it doesn't matter because my wife sends me to wash the dishes, right? That's our spirituality. Well, one day we're walking together in a shopping mall and in Chennai, and my son has a big moment. You see, I've started to call it a big moment because I noticed my training as a psychologist, as a clinical psychologist, was getting in the way of me being present with what was happening. So my wife said, I don't care about your distinctions. You will not use the word meltdown in this house. And she's the boss. So no meltdown. My son doesn't have a meltdown. He's having a big moment, right? She calls it the passing of a wild god. And one day he experiences that in this huge shopping mall called EA in Chennai. And I'm trying to fix him. I'm trying to put him back together. I'm trying to hush him. I'm trying to give him a cookie. I'm trying to say, it'll be all right. It's okay. Just let's get out of here, okay? No need to flail, no need to wail. I'm speaking from my rationality, from the gilded interiority of my rationality. And I'm trying to gentrify him. I'm trying to save him. I'm trying to bring him into my reality. But there's something exquisite about what's passing and what he's sensing that does not lend itself to those moves. Right? And so I'm there, I'm failing, I'm ashamed, and my wife comes up and says, walk away. So I walk away. And she proceeds to lie down, crawls up to him, gets on all fours, crawls up to him, and lies down with him. She doesn't say a word. She doesn't say, it'll be well. She doesn't say, it's going to be fine. She doesn't give him hope. She just stays with that passing too. Because our people know, and we've known for a long time, that when a wild god passes, the thing to do is to prostrate yourself. She does so. She just prostrates. She accommodates him. And it's not accommodating in terms of inclusivity. She doesn't accommodate him, so she accompanies him. She travels alongside him as a shoe. The Yoruba trickster god traveled with the slaves. She travels with him to this desirous place that is beyond words, that is non-legible. She accompanies him. And I'm watching, and I know that is politics. And I know that is emancipatory. I know that is decoloniality playing out in front of me. That is the work of our trickster-infused time. We're still going to notice it big time, that the best we can do, and I think this is becoming increasingly palpable, that the best we can do seems to only reinforce the thing we're trying to extricate ourselves from. That justice is not a postponement of injustice. Justice is a creative reiteration of the conditions that make injustice intelligible. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that story, and that visual. And I'm really grateful that I'm landing on some language around what I've been doing with you across the last couple of years, is traveling with you, just traveling with you as you've had these dialogues and this thinking. So just really grateful for that. And I think I want to reinforce something you named around where we are collectively. We are kind of at an edge, and it's just kind of naming that, like this edge where we are as a society, as a civilization, as a culture. And I'm just grateful that I can be on that edge, with you by my side and with all of you in this rich inquiry. And I hope that this conversation has been troubling for you, and moving, concerning in good ways. And I would love to invite some voices from the community. What we'll do is this: you will say your question or your comment, and Bayo and I will just listen, and we'll listen to all the questions, and then and just to kind of infuse this space with as many community voices as possible. And then we'll, once we hear, a few, we'll have Bayo respond. Obviously, an inquiry like this merits more inquiry. So this is just part 2 of a series, brother. So I want to invite anybody who wishes to bring their voice into this space to raise their hand. There's been so much happening in the chat. The chat itself is a portal, a trickster of sorts. So raise your hand. We'll listen to you. Bayo and I will acknowledge your comment after, but we will not respond. This is called question stacking, to respond. In fact, I want to invite the community to just further appreciate this space and Bayo's time and Bayo's lineage. I hope that today Bayo reminds you of how close we hold you here at the Garrison Institute, and just really appreciate you and really excited to be with you in person. In terms of any response, just how are you feeling right now?
Marked. Marked and imprinted upon by Mankwe and Auntie Shelley and my big loving sister Deb and Ama and Val and Yania and you and everyone here. And to be marked is to be liberated.
So everyone, just such a deep prostration, a deep bow to all of you. Join us in person at the Garrison Institute in July. There may be some possibilities for us to stream some parts of it. We're going to be engaging in fugitivity, so some of that can't be streamed. Some of that can't be streamed. But with that being said, always proud of you, Bayo, always proud of the community in terms of how we show up, sending you all tons of energy. Stay troubled, stay in the cracks,